Good morning, everybody. We're live here from the birdhouse, and today is the 21st of February, although it feels like it is later in the season than that, at least at the moment. We've been having pretty long warm spell here, so I know a lot of you are seeing some of your flowers start to pop up in your garden. Snowdrops are starting to pop up in mine. Some of the buds are starting to pop out on the trees. That's going to change pretty soon. It looks like we're going to have quite the storm come Wednesday, but for the moment, it has been very, very mild. So a lot of people are seeing lots of blackbirds. I had a grackle on my feeder on Sunday, which I couldn't believe. It seems kind of early for that. But we're going to share some of your sightings, share some of the things that you might see right around now, and also going to show you how you can use eBird to report your sightings, at least your bird sightings that you happen to see, and how to do it not only through eBird, but through what's called the New York Breeding Bird Atlas portal, which sounds kind of intimidating, but it's really not. It's one way to track breeding behavior of birds, because right now, New York State is going through its third Breeding Bird Atlas. It is a thing that takes 5 years. And if you can submit not only your bird observations, but what those birds are doing at the same time, if they're showing any breeding signs, that can be very, very helpful for the breeding bird atlas. So we will get started as always. You can say hi if you are on. You can say hello in the comments. We love to know what kind of things you're seeing, especially with this weather being so mild. If there's anything out of the ordinary that you've seen, that would be wonderful. You can put those in the comments. I've seen lots of robins around. I've had some goldfinches at my feeders. Nothing out of the ordinary, though. Lots of mourning doves. I've noticed a pair of cardinals. They seem to be kind of grouping up. The same male and female seem to be there every day, both early in the morning, and then they're the last birds to leave at night. And you guys are still reporting lots of hawks and that kind of a thing. So there is a lot going on. So you can report your sightings. If you have questions, you can throw those in the comments as well. Some animals to be on the lookout for are skunks. I've noticed lots of skunk tracks, even out walking when we did have some layers of snow. Lots of tracks from skunks I've noticed. And unfortunately, I've noticed a lot of them on the side of the road as roadkill. So they seem to be kind of on the move. So keep an eye out for skunks. You might have a burrow nearby, not even know it, but look for their footprints. They almost look like little human footprints. And so you might see some of those out walking around as the weather starts to turn here. Also, mourning cloak butterflies. So mourning cloak butterflies are a species that we have here that hibernates as an adult. So as soon as it starts warming up, and their wings get warm enough so they can fly, you can see them fluttering around. It's not like they spend the winter as an egg or in a chrysalis and have to undergo some of their metamorphosis. They spend the winter as an adult, so they will go into the crevices of trees or rocks or under leaf litter. And then once it starts warming up, so they're known to even be seen in the middle of the winter. If we have a random warm day in the middle of the winter, you can sometimes see them flying around, especially if you're in an area that has a lot of woods around it. Keep an eye out for these mourning cloak butterflies. There's really not anything around here that looks similar to them. They're black or kind of that dark chocolate brown, and then they've got the yellow border around their wings with those little blue dots, and those are called mourning cloak, just like mourning dove, spelled the same way. I've noticed some turkey vultures flying around, of course, lots of red-tailed hawks, but also here and there a couple of turkey vultures, which was kind of surprising. And bluebirds, I noticed in the bluebird boxes that I have bluebirds coming and going in and out of them. So that was really surprising. They weren't carrying any nesting material, but they seem to be scouting out some places for potential nest sites. So once the ground warms up a little bit more, as soon as I can get more nest boxes in the ground, I'm going to be doing that. We just got a whole new shipment of bluebird houses. So if you're looking for some houses to set up, we definitely have them for you, because the bluebirds, they tend to nest early. They're one of our earliest nesting songbirds that we have here. So they're known to nest as early as March sometimes. And if the season remains to be about how it's been, they might start nesting pretty early. And we'll talk about that as we go on a little bit too. As far as your sightings, we've been getting lots of reports. We always get lots of reports of starlings, which are here all year round. But at the same time, you might start to see some other blackbirds that are in that mix, like red-winged blackbirds. Lots of people are reporting red-winged blackbirds, especially at their feeders, which makes sense. They eat a lot of insects, but if they're coming back up north and the insect material is going to be scarce for a while, they've got to resort to something else. So they've been coming to feeders. This photo was sent in by Mark of a red-winged blackbird just the other day. So a lot of you guys have been reporting red-winged blackbirds, both male, female, at the feeders. I saw my first grackle on Sunday, and I'm sure some of you guys are seeing them too. It kind of took me by surprise. If you are starting to get a whole bunch of grackles coming to your yard and you want to kind of keep them at bay, you can always feed the safflower seed. Grackles don't like it. The red-winged blackbirds don't like it. Starlings don't like it. But birds like cardinals and finches, they all really, really like that safflower seed. So that's one way you can kind of keep them at bay in your yard. And then brown-headed cowbird as well is another species that people have been reporting again at their feeders. And these will sometimes form mixed flocks, all these birds, the red-winged blackbirds, the common grackle, brown-headed cowbird. So look for all of these right now coming back to your feeders. You might just happen to see them. And although it seems a little early, I pulled this information from eBird, which we'll be talking about next, to see just how early or uncommon it might be. And this is the bar charts feature that eBird has. So if you go onto the eBird website, which is ebird.org, and if you click explore, there's different things you can explore. There's maps, and one of them is bar charts. And that's what I clicked on here. And this shows the historical data of all the birds in our county and when they come and go. So you can see the thicker the band gets, that means they're more common and they have been reported more. So down here under this blue stripe here, you can see things like orchard oriole. We wouldn't expect them to be around here, but they start to be reported around very end of April, and then in May they really start to flow in. Same with Baltimore oriole. That's one question we get all the time, or when are the orioles coming back? And the answer is late April, and then in early May they start to really flow in. But then also on here are red-winged blackbird, brown-headed cowbird, and the common grackle. And you can see there's never a month where they're not reported. So they are around all year round, although many of them do migrate and go a little bit further south for the winter. Not all of them do. So it's not completely uncommon to see them around this time of the year. So although they might be here this year in larger numbers, it's not totally uncommon. So but you can absolutely report them to eBird, and I'll show you guys how to do that, because it could be that they're coming back a little bit earlier in mass, but it's hard to say at this point right now. As far as eBird goes, what it is it is an app, or there's also a web portal that you can use to submit your birding data in here. Let me take off this little logo here just so you guys can see everything a little bit better. So yeah, eBird has an app completely free that you can download on your phone, and it's a way to manage all of your bird checklists, to see what kind of birds are in your area. If you're looking for a specific species, you can look for those and see where you might find it, see where it's been reported recently. So it's a really strong tool. And it's also used in conservation, and I'll show you some examples of how it has been used. Another app you might want to download, if you haven't already, we've talked about this one a lot too, is the app called Merlin. Both of these are completely free. They are from the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. The Merlin app will help you identify the bird. So eBird is where you submit your data, but it doesn't help you identify the birds in any way. Merlin will help you identify the bird. So if you have a picture of a bird, you don't know what it is, if you are hearing a bird and you don't know what it is, or if you just want to have almost like a little field guide in the palm of your hand on your smartphone, that's Merlin. Merlin will do all of that for you. And then when you figure out what it is you're seeing, you can submit your observations with eBird. So as far as eBird goes, eBird started in 2002. It's the world's largest biodiversity citizen science project. It's available in every country. So if you do travel, you can still use eBird. It is available in over 40 languages, and over 100 million sightings are reported each year. And this is from about a year ago, so this could even be bigger now. It wouldn't surprise me if that's a larger number. So why use it? Well, what's the point? Why use it? It helps you manage your bird lists, so you can keep track of what you've seen, when you've seen it, where you've seen it. You can upload your photos as well. So if you want to keep a database of your photos to go with your observations, this is a good tool for that. You can also upload sound recordings if you happen to be taking sound recordings of birds. You can locate local birds and find local hotspots. And your sightings do matter. So every bird that you see does count, even if it's something like these house sparrows here. eBird transforms your bird sightings into critical data for research, conservation, and education. Every sighting, no matter how small, can make a really big difference. And how are they used is a good question. So here's some examples of how eBird data has been used for conservation purposes. So one is the listing of tricolored blackbirds as threatened. So the tricolored blackbird has traditionally been a very difficult species to study. It's nomadic, it's rare, and it's poorly understood. eBird helped change this, providing data that was essential to the California Fish and Wildlife Department to officially list the tricolored blackbird as threatened under the Endangered Species Act. The eBird data was a critical piece of that information and showed a 52% population decline over the past decade. So these eBird sightings are submitted and it goes into a giant database, and that database can help with population trends, help determine what those population trends are, whether they're positive, whether they're negative. Like we talk about all the time, how red-bellied woodpeckers are increasing their range. Carolina wrens are increasing their range. Red-headed woodpeckers, their populations are decreasing. All of that information is derived from mainly this eBird data. So it's a really strong tool. It can also prioritize different habitats, different areas. We can do all the conservation that we want here in our local area, but if the places that these birds overwinter in are not experiencing any kind of conservation initiatives or they're being deforested, that habitat is gone, and it can be a critical habitat for those birds in other times of the year. So eBird data can be used to figure out which areas should be conserved, whether or not they're local or they're far away. One example is with the wood thrush, and when they're here in the spring and summer months, but then of course they go south for the winter. And one of the areas that they stay in the winter is this Maya forest. And so the Maya forest covers 35 million acres across parts of Mexico, Belize, Guatemala. So that makes it one of the largest tropical rainforests in North and Central America. In addition to many regionally endemic species, meaning endemic, meaning they are only found in that one small area, it is a critically important wintering region for many migrant songbirds from North America. Recent eBird modeling work shows that many species concentrate nearly their entire population in that area during the winter, including this bird here, the wood thrush. This realization has helped spark new efforts to conserve this ecologically important region. So all that eBird data will determine where these birds go. It can be seen now where they spend all of their time. And what's really cool is if you explore eBird a little bit more, the Cornell Lab of Ornithology site, you'll start to see some of these maps where it shows their relative abundance over time. So Down here, you can see where they're concentrated in January. And when I play this, this will show as their population moves as they are migrating up north. It'll show where it changes, where they go to, and when. So there's all these different tools that eBird allows for. And this is one of them, this population mapping. So you can see them, how they come and go over time. So it's important to not only conserve their breeding habitat, but absolutely the habitat where they spend the winters, which you can see is down here in Mexico and South America, Central America there. So really cool different maps where you can see the bird populations move over time. So there have been some different other conservation efforts, like the pied cuckoo, which is a very rare bird. Using eBird data, they've been able to see how their populations will shift depending on monsoons. So how do you do it? How do you participate? eBird is a community, so there are users. You create a username, and you can figure out what your local hotspots are, and you can create a profile if you choose to. You can find the birds near you. So for example, say you've always wanted to see a snowy owl. You can search eBird to see where snowy owls have been seen, the last time they were reported, where they were reported. So it can help you find that certain bird that you've been trying to find. Also, you can search different hotspots if you're looking for a new place to go, if you've been going to the same parks over and over again and you're looking for something different. eBird will show you different hotspots and how many species have been reported in each one. So for an example, I took some screenshots this morning here of the eBird app. So if you were to download the eBird app, you hit start, and the first thing you'll see is the option to start a checklist. So that's if you're out birding, you want to click that and you can start your birding checklist. But down here at the bottom, there's a little magnifying glass that says explore. So if you click explore, this screen will pop up, and it will pop up your area. So if you're out west, it'll pop up wherever you are out west, and it'll show you all these different little pinpoints of different hotspots regionally in your area, how many species have been observed in the last 7 days. So locally in this highlighted area, there's been 105 species seen locally, and the target species are the number that have been reported that I have not reported myself. So there's been 79 targets. So that would be, if you're trying to fill out your checklist and get as many birds as you can, you've got target species because you have yet to see them. So I zoomed in a little bit and clicked on one of the locations just to show you what it looks like. Here's North Ponds Park out in Webster. Super easy to get to, big parking lot, flat, easy to walk. So that's a really good place to go. When you click on it, it'll show you how many species have been reported at all time for forever. There's been 172 species that have been reported there throughout all of eBird's existence. Right now, however, 48 you'd be likely to see, so it wouldn't be uncommon to see 48 of these different species right now. And over in the last 23 days, or in the last 7 days, 23 species have been reported. So if you click on the details, it will then show you all the species that have been seen over time. So there's different tabs. These are the 172 species, this list. You can keep scrolling through and it'll show you the 48 species that you'd be likely to see this time of the year. And it shows you their abundance as well by month. It's kind of hard to see in this photo, but down here it says January, February, March, April, May. So you can see when they're coming and going. And over the last 23 days, or last 7 days, you can see those 23 birds that have been reported. So it's a really strong tool for figuring out what birds are where and when. So to share your sightings on eBird, that's all you need to do is submit where you are, what you've seen, and how. How meaning, were you traveling? Were you just standing put? I can show you what that looks like in just a moment as well. So I've been talking about this breeding bird atlas thing that's been going on in the state, and that is just an extra layer of reporting that you can do via eBird if you decide to. You absolutely don't have to, but it can help with the atlas. So in order to do that, you've downloaded your eBird app, and how you get to report your breeding bird sightings is you want to go down at the bottom. We were just at the Explore that had the little magnifying glass. If you go all the way to the right, there's something that says More, and that will pull up your profile. And then you click on Settings and Account, and that's where you see all your account settings. So it'll show your username, and if you scroll down at the very end, it says portal, and it will automatically have you just on the eBird portal. But if you click on that, a list will pop up, and all these different options are available. One of them being the New York Breeding Bird Atlas. So you can click on that, and you can see that other places are also doing atlases. So looks like North Carolina is doing one. New Zealand, if you happen to be going to New Zealand, there's an atlas going on there. It looks like Wisconsin and Virginia are having them as well. But here in New York, you can submit your sightings via the New York Breeding Bird Atlas. So you just click on that, and then you're in. And it doesn't mean you have to do anything extra, but it gives you that option too. So say, for example, I pulled up this Eastern bluebird. So say I'm on a hike, I pull up Eastern bluebird, I see a bluebird, and I can not only report the number observed, but you can click on breeding codes at the bottom here, and you can add that extra layer of data. So they've changed this a bit since the last time I used it. So now the breeding codes look like this. They used to be a list that said all of them, but now they're coded. So it makes it a little bit more difficult unless you know all the codes by heart. But there are different letters associated with different breeding codes. F, for example, is a flyover. If there's a bird just flying over your head, you can submit that. That's a breeding code. CN is carrying nesting material. So that's one I know happens a lot in backyards. If you see a bird, especially if you've got nesting material that you put out, the nesting balls and things like that, if you see a bird with a bunch of nesting material in its beak, that's a breeding code. So carrying nesting material is one. Sitting on a nest is a breeding code. Once you've seen young and they're out of the nest, that's a breeding code. So it just adds an extra level. And if you go onto eBird or go search for New York Breeding Bird Atlas, you can see the full list of those codes if you choose to use them. So that's how you use the portal. And the New York Breeding Bird Atlas also has social media, like every organization at this point. And on their Instagram yesterday, they just posted this, which I thought was pretty interesting. So this is their Instagram account. I'm sure they've got a Facebook page too. New York Breeding Bird Atlas. They said, with downstate New York having its warmest winter in over 90 years, breeding might begin early for some species this year. It's critical that we capture atlas data during this anomaly, even though it seems so early. Here's a list of hardy species that have been recorded on eggs before spring has even begun. This great horned owl was recorded incubating on Long Island today, which was yesterday. We will see if we add any species to the list next month. So there are some species that might start exhibiting some of this breeding bird behavior, including great horned owls are one. You can see a lot of these are birds of prey, owls, bald eagles, red-tailed hawks, peregrine falcons. They're known to start nesting early, so they might start exhibiting some of this breeding bird behavior. Other birds you might see locally exhibiting this would be ravens and crows, and mourning doves and pigeons. Those would be the most likely out of this list here. So you might have the opportunity to submit some of that data soon. When do you start and stop bird checklists? You want to start your checklist as soon as you start birding. Once you get to a location, if you are hiking for miles and miles and miles, you might want to do several small checklists instead of one massive one. That's so that way you can kind of see exactly where your sightings were scattered over that large expanse. And the locations, a lot of the times, will pop up for you. So if you're in an area, say you go to Tinker Park, or we talked about North Ponds Park, if you go to start a checklist, as long as you have it set up where the app can determine your location, usually the park or the area that you're already in, somebody has done a checklist there, and it will pop up that location. But some of them are near each other, so you can search the different locations to see which one matches your actual location best. Or you can start your own as well. If you're in the middle of nowhere and there's nothing close, you can just do a drop pin and it'll start a new location, and that'll just be based on the coordinates, which you can rename if it's someplace you go back to all the time. So there's different distances too. It'll say, what kind of checklist are you doing? Are you traveling? Are you stationary? Is it incidental? So traveling is probably what most checklists, I would say, are. If you're traveling long distances on foot or by car and making many stops along a road, you'll need to decide when to stop tallying one checklist and start a new one if it's a long distance. Checklists for shorter distance and duration have the most value. So basically, if you had one checklist that spanned 20 miles, it doesn't mean as much as 20 checklists that each span 1 mile, if that makes sense. So try to keep your checklist short, 5 miles or less. So these are the different types of checklists: traveling, stationary, incidental, historical. And checklists can be shared. So if you're together with other people who are eBird users, you can add them to your checklist. And then all that you saw will also be put into their eBird profile. Traveling is when you're moving. So that's the best way to describe that. Stationary is if you're just staying put. If you're doing something like feeder watch, backyard bird counts, that would be a stationary observation. Incidental is if birding was not your primary purpose, basically. So say, like this picture shows, you're driving down the side of the road, you find gold of a deer carcass, and there's a bald eagle feeding on it. That would be an incidental sighting. But if you can stay for a few minutes and report any other birds that you might see, whether they're even starlings or mourning doves on the side of the road, any other data that you can provide to go with that incidental checklist is very important. And then there's historical. So historical is, say you find your old birding lists, your old birding checklists. You've got your date, you've got the park that you were at. You can still put those sightings into eBird. It might not have the very specific time, but you can still put that data in for eBird, and that would be a historical sighting. And then you want to hit that yes, you are reporting all the species that you have been able to identify. That doesn't mean that you were able to identify, say you saw something, you don't know what it is. You can still say, yes, you were able to report all the species you were able to identify. So what this just means, I'm not saying it very well, is you want to report everything you're able to identify, even if you see things that don't seem very important, like starlings or house sparrows. All that data is just as important as a rare bird that you might see. So even if you aren't able to identify everything you are able to identify should go on that checklist. And if you're not sure what you're seeing, like I mentioned at the very beginning, the Merlin Bird ID app is perfect for that. So you snap a photo of something beautiful like this brightly colored bird. The Merlin app, you can upload that photo to it, and it'll usually identify it pretty well, or it'll come really close. So you can use that to help you with your identifications. And to get started, all you need to do is download the app, and when you open it up, there's a big start menu there, and you can play around with it and have a lot of fun. So it is a really good tool for for birding and for submitting your observations. So if you have any questions, you can throw those in the comments. It looks like there's some people who've commented here. Margaret is on and says, good morning, all. I have a ton of goldfinches, and the males are turning yellower by the day. Oh, that's great. All right. So, yeah, the males will molt their kind of drab colored feathers. Their feathers are pretty drab right now. They'll molt those into bright, bright gold fairly soon, hopefully. Randy's on and says, good morning. And he says, robins and goldfinches, chickadees and cardinals are back. So he's having a whole mix of different birds there. Nancy says, coyote sauntering through my backyard yesterday. Maybe we'll catch the 5 feral cats hanging around my feeders. Cycle of life. So Nancy has a coyote wandering around. That's pretty exciting. And Ed says, just now we have 2 red-winged blackbirds working the feeders. And thanks for all the detail on eBird and the New York Breeding Bird Atlas. The Birdhouse broadcast is always helpful. Oh, thank you so much. Thank you for reporting your sightings there. And Lynn is saying lots of birds singing this morning. I agree. I've been hearing more and more calls. The cardinals, they usually start singing pretty early, but now their songs are getting longer. The house sparrows are all chitter-chattering. Carolina wrens are singing. When I was mentioning bluebirds going in and out of houses, they were singing too. So it's that time of the year. They're starting to get chatty. They might quiet down a bit as we start to get that storm later on this week, but we'll see what happens. And we will be back on Saturday with another broadcast. And until then, you guys have a great week, and we'll